So, hold on, let me show you. I'm not sure if it was this book or if it was just a book like this, but it was one of those 1900 to 2000s books. Anyways, back in high school, I used to we'll get into this in a second. I used to read in the library after lunch while in between classes, and normally I'd read Theodore Gray's The Elements, but I decided to switch it up and read that one book. And then, yeah, there were several articles between 1900 and 2000 that mentioned this. I'm not going to say that word out loud because in this context, it's kind of like old-timey racism, but, yeah, I've got to read about this. It's complicated, but, yeah, it's like post-World War II, warfare, people trying to sort out, like, geo-social, political stuff. But, yeah. But, yeah, so I'll be studying this so I can be more, literate about world history, but, let's go back. Sorry, I'm literally reading. You should read along too. Unless you can't. Just teasing, sorry. Not sure if they're gonna talk about it here, but I noticed that for several years until like the 1960s, when it suddenly switched to like England for some reason, America and France, they had like a real cultural back and forth. They were real fans of each other. It was very interesting. And also cars were becoming a thing, so that was also interesting to see happen in what felt like real time. Um, but what else? Sorry, I got allergies. Oh yeah. In the 1960s, I feel like then America and England became big fans of each other because of the Beatles, obviously. But then in the 1970s, America became very self-absorbed, I feel. Or maybe I'm not remembering correctly. But then, distinctly during the 1980s, things got very pop culture-y. And then the 2000s, video games and stuff. So it was very weird. It felt like very, very, very old timey. And then, like, right around the 1970s, I was like, oh, the stuff, the pop culture stuff exists now. So that was interesting. Yeah. Oh, yeah, but, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Because the automat is very similar to, Amazon's, um, and all those other like contactless stores that you see. Amazon was recently in controversy for allegedly just having a bunch of people on webcams tally it up instead of using like complex algorithms. But yeah, real automats were a thing. Apparently it started in Germany in 1895, but we had them in America for a while. They're still a big deal in Japan, but yeah, they were actually just like a safe place to hang out because nobody was gonna like give you grief. It's like a real thing. People thought of them as the maxims of the disenfranchised, so yeah, that was apparently all the way back even in the 80s, so dang. Oh, but they were already nostalgic by the 70s. Huh. And the last one closed in 1991. Neat. So yeah, time travel. It's fun. You should do it more often. Alright, bye everybody. Oh, but remember not to physically time travel. Yeah. Let me show y'all something to explain what I mean by that. So this is the Antikythera mechanism. It wasn't like the highest tech marvel in the world. They had like tons of cool little gadgets and gizmos. Um, this is in the BC era, like when the pyramids were new and stuff. So, yeah. Alright, so you see this? And this thing is not alone. Watch. This is me from the future, and I just wanted to say real quick that, what I was trying to say here was that they tended to value the materials used to make these mechanisms as, for statues and weapons more than they valued them for mechanisms. So, yeah, you can have your cute little mechanisms, except for during wartime or if we need to build a temple and we need to melt your mechanisms down. So, the point is, they had these mechanisms, but did they value them the same way we would, where we have a very practical outlook on the mechanisms and we view the mechanisms as like practical and useful? They might view a statue to a god as more practical and useful, or they might view a spear for like actual like warfare as more practical and useful. I'm not sure if ancient Greek vending machines were ever a thing, but I mean, maybe because they were not a thing, they didn't realize just how useful mechanisms were yet. And they didn't have the Babbage analytical engine yet. Machines that could think were still a ways off because humans had not imagined them yet, not because humans didn't have the means to make them. So that's what I'm about to be trying to say. Continue watching. They had steam engines back then too. And yet they never built trains or pinball machines or video games so far as we know. And what that tells you is you can bring water to the horse, but you can't make it drink. And what I mean by that is they definitely had the technology to do everything that we did in the late 1800s, and yet they never did that because they didn't have the culture or the, how do you put it? They had the intelligence, but they didn't have the societal infrastructure to do it. And technology can change really quickly, but until the culture is prepared for that, the culture will force it to stagnate. What I mean by that is some weirdo somewhere will have really cool technology, but everywhere else just no one else will care. Which means that person's technology will be really expensive and probably. Let me show you. So, once he started to get older and people stole his ideas and he had a hard time with money, he started making really grand claims. Oh, sorry, Nikola Tesla, the famous mad scientist guy, about a thing called a teleforce weapon, that they renamed the Death Ray. Yeah, it was probably all hype. And so that's the problem with technology not being well distributed among us common folk. If it's not like well distributed for everybody and it's not taught in school, it won't catch on. And if it doesn't catch on, it'll be misunderstood and people will fall for hype and will associate it with like individuals who are just, being individuals and don't necessarily, like, what am I trying to say here? Hold on. Like this, the great man theory of history. Um, uh, it can seem relatively harmless when that great man is alive, and everybody's decided that, like, Thomas Edison is going to be the dude who does all the cool stuff, but But then when they die, it can be very discouraging for their fans, and then they act like, oh no, if the genius is dead, who's going to figure it out? I subscribe to the idea that the technology just comes around when the collective imagination is ready for it, and that one guy is the one who just wins the bubble race, basically. Hold on. After venture capital was no longer available, the operational mentality of executives and investors completely changed. The dot-com company's lifespan was measured by its burn rate, the rate at which it spent existing capital, blah, blah, blah. As growth in the technology sector stabilized, companies consolidated. So that's actually what Edison did. He did invent a few things, but he was more of a consolidator. He took inventions under his wing and took credit for them, like these guys, like it says right here. So that's the thing, though. When people aren't ready for a technology, they often associate it with the person or group of people who present it to them, and that's bad because technology is for everybody. We can all do it, and that's what I mean. It takes a while for it to catch on, even if it technically is already here and already everywhere. It takes a while for people to like really normalize it and think about what they can do with it. And I think the invention of the internet changed the collective human imagination so that we are used to the idea of things changing rapidly, and we're more willing to accept new ideas into a part of our everyday culture and everyday life because we can see how other people successfully adopt them, and we can share that information rapidly. But again, with the what is it called, the dead internet theory, and also the rise of the risk of AI generated misinformation, we could potentially enter a winter of human intelligence where us human beings can't use the internet to see how our fellow human beings are getting along, because when we do, we're just bombarded with scams and misinformation and false reporting, and it causes us to be really confused about like what technology actually exists, how to get a hold of it, and the best ways to use it, meaning that we could wind up regressing a little bit if we don't take AI safety seriously. But you know, time is tree-shaped, so even if we wind up in a dystopian universe, humanity itself, from a multiversal perspective, will be fine. So don't worry about it too much. Just do your best to be your best, you know? So rock on, everybody. That's all.